I'd imagined the moment countless times on the flight back. After 2 grueling weeks filled with endless conferences and boardrooms, all I craved was the warmth of home. I kept picturing Derek's face when he opened the door, surprised, then thrilled, then that slow, crooked smile I had always loved. Maybe he'd pull me into his arms without a word. Maybe we'd laugh about how I couldn't wait one more day to see him. It was supposed to be the perfect homecoming moment, a moment I'd been longing for. The familiar sound of my suitcase rolling over cracks in the pavement echoed in my ears as I turned onto our street. The sun began its descent behind the rooftops, casting a warm, golden glow over everything. I smiled to myself, a flutter of anticipation in my chest. It felt like confetti. But then I saw them. Balloons, pink and blue. At first, my mind couldn't quite process what I was seeing. It didn't register. Maybe a neighbor's party, perhaps someone else's celebration. But then I saw the banner strung proudly across our front porch. It was impossible to miss. Bright, cheerful letters, hand-painted and fluttering slightly in the breeze. Welcome our little miracle. I froze. The smile that had been playing on my lips vanished so quickly that it felt like whiplash. The roller suitcase in my hand tilted, and my grip on the handle weakened before tightening again, my knuckles whitening. My heart, which had been swelling with the sweet ache of coming home, began to hammer in confusion. No, this couldn't be right. I hadn't told Derek I was coming back early. This had to be some elaborate neighborhood mix-up. A misunderstanding. But as my gaze shifted back to the mailbox, my name on it, the realization sank in. I parked quietly across the street, not sure whether to believe what my eyes were telling me. I sat there, engine off, my breathing shallow and fast. I stared at the porch, at the way the sun caught on the streamers and ribbons. So festive. So intimate. But it was entirely foreign to me. It wasn't just the decorations. No, there was something else in the air that made everything feel wrong, like walking into a play halfway through and realizing the actors didn't know you were part of the cast. The house, the setup, the energy, it all felt alien. I stepped out of the car, my legs stiff, as if they might betray me. I left my suitcase behind, abandoned on the sidewalk like it no longer belonged to me. Each step toward the house was slow, deliberate, my mind desperately begging reality to offer some explanation that didn't end in betrayal. But it didn't come. When I reached the porch, I noticed the door was slightly ajar. And then I heard it. Laughter. Soft. Familiar. Intimate. A man's voice. Derek's voice. And then a woman's laugh. That laugh. Tessa Morgan. My stomach churned. It felt like it had turned inside out. I pressed myself against the side of the house, out of sight, and peered through the front window. I should have stopped there. I should have turned around, walked away, spared myself the pain of seeing what I feared was unfolding before me. But curiosity is cruel. It doesn't care about preservation. It demands answers, no matter the cost. Inside, the living room looked like a scene straight out of a domestic dream. Everything was perfect, too perfect. The warm glow of soft lighting, the carefully arranged furniture, the way everything seemed to center around Derek and Tessa. It was all too much to bear. I stood frozen, watching through the window, unable to pull myself away. Every inch of me screamed to stop, but my feet were glued to the ground. I didn't know what to do. Should I confront them? Should I turn and walk away, pretending I hadn't seen anything? But the truth was undeniable. The scene inside was straight out of a picture-perfect gathering. Streamers, baby gifts wrapped in pastel colors, and cupcakes adorned with tiny pink and blue decorations. But it wasn't the decor that struck me. It was Derek, standing beside Tessa, his hand gently resting on her swollen belly. She was glowing, radiant, happy, as though she belonged there. He laughed at something she said, his eyes soft and proud, completely at ease in a moment that should have been mine. For a moment, the world just stopped. I stood there, heart split open, staring through the glass at two people who had rewritten our story without me. My breath hitched in my throat, tight with the weight of it all. Every memory of Derek, our late-night talks, the inside jokes, The vows we exchanged with shaking hands flashed before me like a cruel montage. None of it had ever included her, my best friend, the one I trusted, the one who had been there through everything from the very beginning. I blinked, unsure if the moisture on my cheeks came from the wind or from the truth breaking through, uninvited, but undeniably real. And then, I pushed open the door. The laughter died instantly. Conversations halted mid-sentence. All eyes turned to me, frozen in their tracks.
I didn't speak.
Derek's face drained of color. His body stiffened, as though someone had turned his insides to stone. Tessa's face transformed into a mask of surprise, a deer caught in headlights, her hand instinctively sliding over her belly as if to protect it, as if to protect herself from the truth. Cynthia, Derek's mother, stood frozen with a champagne flute halfway to her lips. I let the silence stretch, let it choke the room, the way confusion and betrayal had choked me. Derek stepped forward, barely a whisper escaping his lips. "You're early." I looked at him, really looked at him. He stood there, in the middle of a celebration I hadn't known about, surrounded by people I trusted, for a child that had nothing to do with me. The fire rising in my chest was nearly unbearable, but I swallowed it down, my voice steady and quiet. "Yeah," I said. Just in time, it seems. I didn't walk in like a hurricane. I glided in like a ghost. Their stunned faces were like an unspoken portrait I would never forget. Derek's mouth moved soundlessly, his mind scrambling to stitch together some excuse, some justification for the scene that I had walked in on. Tessa, my best friend since college, looked like a porcelain doll someone had carelessly dropped. Her hand stayed protectively on her belly, as though I might lunge at her. The absurdity of it almost made me laugh.
Me?
The threat? I didn't say a word as I stepped further into the room, slowly closing the door behind me with the softest click. The quiet in the room was so dense, so suffocating. I could hear the flutter of the banners in the air conditioning, the soft hum of a room paralyzed by guilt and shame. My eyes scanned the room, lingering on every face, each one now a part of a scene I hadn't been invited to. Cynthia Carter, my mother-in-law, wouldn't meet my gaze. She clutched her drink tighter, suddenly very interested in the intricate pattern of the rug beneath her heels. Derek's older cousin, Greg, shifted uncomfortably, whispering something to his wife. They both looked guilty, uncomfortable, like they knew. They all knew, and not one of them told me. I stood there for a moment longer, giving them a chance to explain. But no one spoke. Finally, I turned my gaze to the window, the same one I had stood behind moments earlier. It was surreal, seeing it from this side. Inside now, but still somehow an outsider in my own home. I had watched this twisted little tableau unfold through that very glass pane, and now I was a part of the performance, whether I wanted to be or not. I let the silence breathe for a few more seconds, watching Derek squirm. His eyes darted nervously between me and Tessa, panic sharpening his features. But still, he hadn't moved toward me. Still, he hadn't said the words. So I helped him. How long? My voice cut through the tension like a blade.
Steady.
Measured. Lethal. Derek blinked, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Elena, how long? I repeated, slower this time, the sting in my words undeniable. Tessa opened her mouth to speak, but I held up my hand and looked straight at her.
No.
Not you. I turned back to him. I asked my husband. Derek rubbed his hands over his face. His shoulders sagged under the weight of what he had to face, but he still couldn't find the words. It wasn't, he stammered, but it was too late for excuses. A bitter laugh escaped me before I could catch it. That's what people say about fender benders, I said, my voice cold. Not creating human life with someone's best friend. Tessa let out a small sob. I turned to look at her again. Really look at her. Her eyes were red, mascara already beginning to run, her face devastated. And for a split second, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Good, I said quietly. You knew I loved him.
You were there, when we met.
You helped me plan our wedding, Tessa. You held my hand when I cried after my miscarriage. Tessa's face crumpled at my words. The tears in her eyes matched the tremble in my voice, but I refused to break. Not here. Not in front of them. Cynthia finally spoke, her voice sharp and strained. Elena, this isn't what you think. A mix of surprise and indignation. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Derek, looking like he'd just been struck, stood frozen a few feet away. His mouth opened and closed, but it seemed as if everything had been drained from him. I took a deep breath, the air thick with all the unspoken words that had been building for far too long. Every ounce of my body trembled, but I wouldn't break. Not now. I wasn't going to let them treat me like this anymore. You betrayed me. All of you. I said, my voice steady, but the weight of it hung heavy in the room. And I'm done pretending I don't see it. Tessa looked like she might collapse, her tears falling freely, her hand still clutching her belly. But she wasn't the only one who had a right to grieve. I had loved Derek like no one else, and she had known the depth of that love, the vulnerability that came with it. She had been my best friend, the one person I trusted above all others. Don't apologize, I said, locking eyes with her. Not for me. Not for Derek. You've already shown me who you are. Now you'll live with it. I turned to Cynthia, her face drained of all color now. And you should be ashamed. You've been my mother-in-law, someone I thought I could trust. But you've just let this happen right under your nose. You should have said something. But there was nothing more to be said. The silence in the room was palpable, suffocating even. I didn't need to say anything else. They all knew it was over. I walked toward the door, feeling the weight of their stares. Derek's voice called after me, but I ignored it. As I stepped outside, the cool air wrapped around me like a comfort I hadn't realized I needed. The world outside was still, but I felt free. The weight of their secrets, their betrayal, was too much to carry anymore. I knew that in time, the sting would fade, and I would rebuild. But for now, it was just me, walking away from everything I had known, but reclaiming the parts of myself I had lost. Through the city, letting the busy streets and the hum of life distract me from the ache gnawing at my core. The world continued to move, people going about their lives as if nothing had changed. It was a strange contrast to the chaos I'd just left behind, as if I was the only one in a vacuum, suspended in this new reality that no one else had been part of. I walked aimlessly, each step a reminder that I was no longer tethered to the life I thought I would have. The thought of Derek and Tessa's baby, our baby named now hers, lingered in my mind, but I refused to let it consume me. I wasn't that woman anymore. I wasn't the one who would bend and break for them. I wasn't the woman they expected me to be, the one who would quietly endure and pretend that nothing was wrong. By the time the sun began to set, I found myself at a small park. The fading light cast long shadows across the grass, and I sat on a bench near a fountain, watching the water as it rippled in the fading twilight. It felt peaceful, almost healing, even though a part of me was still fighting against the storm inside. I let out a breath, my shoulders sagging as I tried to release the tension that had gripped me for so long. I didn't know what would come next, but for the first time in ages, I felt a sliver of hope. I wasn't sure what I was hoping for, maybe just a chance to breathe, a moment to regroup. The sound of my phone buzzing in my pocket startled me, but I didn't reach for it. I didn't want to hear from Derek, didn't want to hear more pleas for forgiveness, more manipulations, disguised as apologies. I wasn't weak anymore. I wasn't the woman who would fall for his charm again. The hours stretched on, and eventually, I made my way back to the hotel. The room was still just as I had left it, silent, cold, and unfamiliar. But for the first time in what felt like forever, I was okay with that. It wasn't home, not yet, but it was mine. And for now, that was enough. The next chapter of my life was still waiting to be written. And I wasn't going to let anyone else dictate how it would unfold. Divorce process, pulling out every trick in the book, pleas for reconciliation, promises of change, even guilt-laden attempts to manipulate my feelings. But none of it worked. It was almost laughable. Derek, the man who never seemed to understand the weight of commitment, now desperately clung to the idea of me, like a child clinging to a crumbling toy. I remained quiet, focused, and relentless. I didn't need to engage with his cries for attention. Everything was moving forward at my pace now. Raymond kept me on track, ensuring that the final stages of the divorce were handled with precision. He didn't sugarcoat things for me, nor did he offer any false hope. "This is your life now, Elena," he'd remind me. "You get to choose what comes next." And so I did. Each decision felt deliberate, like I was reclaiming every inch of myself that had been lost in the years of trying to make a marriage work that was never meant to be. The house sold quickly. The funds were transferred into my name. And while Derek and Tessa struggled to keep up their charade, I quietly took control of everything that had once been shared between us: finances, assets, and most importantly, my own identity. One evening, as the final papers were filed and the dust settled, I took a moment to breathe. The weight of the past few months had been heavy, but now there was a lightness. No more lingering doubts.
No more second-guessing.
I had become the architect of my own future, and that future was filled with possibilities I had once abandoned. I poured myself a glass of wine, sat on the balcony of my new condo, and watched the sunset. It was a different view than the one I had shared with Derek, but it was mine. The world stretched out before me, wide open. No longer bound by the confines of a relationship that had kept me in a prison of my own making, I was free. The phone buzzed again. It was Derek, but I didn't even look at the message. I smiled, watching the last traces of daylight fade from the sky, knowing that I had finally walked away from the life I thought I wanted, and had chosen the life that was waiting for me all along. Grocery store. She'd moved back in with her parents, and Derek was back to living alone. But it wasn't just her leaving him that shattered him. It was the realization that his entire world had crumbled beneath him, piece by piece, and that he was no longer the man I once knew. I let the news wash over me, unbothered. My life, meanwhile, was moving forward. I had made peace with the fact that I wasn't the same woman I had been when I first walked into that marriage. I was stronger now. I was sharper. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming myself. There was a freedom in that, in knowing I didn't have to keep fighting for a place that wasn't mine to begin with. In the weeks that followed, I focused on myself, my career, and what came next. The silence of my home became a comfortable companion. It was mine, and I owned every corner of it. I threw myself into my work, building a future that was entirely mine. There were still moments when the past knocked on my door, memories, small reminders, but they didn't control me anymore. As for Derek, he eventually reached out again. There was no apology, no grand gesture, just a message asking how I was doing. I didn't respond, because the truth was I didn't care anymore. What I had needed from him, what I had yearned for, was long gone. I didn't need him to validate me. I had already validated myself. Once mattered. His eyes met mine, and I could see the flicker of recognition, followed by the awkward shuffle of his gaze, as if he didn't know whether to feel relief or shame. His lips parted like he was about to say something, but the words stalled in his throat. I didn't feel the rush of old emotions, no anger, no longing, just a dull recognition of what had once been and what would never be again. The man who sat there now wasn't the one I had loved, wasn't the one I had once hoped for. This was just a man, lost in the fallout of his own decisions. I didn't approach him. I didn't wave. I didn't acknowledge the weight of the past or the half-finished bottle he was nursing. He was still a part of the story I had long since stopped reading. I turned back to my table, my friends, my conversation. My life had moved forward, and this encounter was just another piece of the world that no longer had a place for him in it. The night went on, the hum of the bar filling the space between us. He didn't come over. He didn't try to talk, and I didn't need him to. When I left later that evening, I didn't glance back. The city lights twinkled against the cool night air, and as I walked down the sidewalk, I realized something. I hadn't just moved on from him. I'd moved on from needing any form of closure. I had finally let go. Anything. Not my time. Not my care. Not even a sliver of the space I'd once offered freely. I put my phone down and took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the silence settle around me. It was a quiet kind of peace, The kind that grows when you've let go of the ties that once bound you, even when they still scream for your attention. I wasn't angry. I wasn't sad. I was just free. I had stopped being the woman who ran to fix everything, who gave and gave until there was nothing left. I had learned to rebuild on my own terms, to walk away when there was nothing left but ashes and regret. That was their life now. And this was mine. I didn't need to relive the mistakes, didn't need to revisit the pain they had caused. I had already moved on, already found a life where I wasn't drowning in someone else's mess, where I wasn't second place or an afterthought. So I went back to what made me whole. The quiet mornings, the long walks, the freedom to choose my path. I picked up my sketchbook again. I worked on my goals, on the future I was building, and I didn't look back. The past was just that, past. And I was no longer a character in their story. I had become the author of my own. This piece really captures the emotional journey of a woman reclaiming her life and strength after betrayal. The gradual shift from pain and loss to peace and self-empowerment is beautifully depicted. The ending, where she reflects on the freedom she's gained, feels like a powerful culmination of her personal growth. It's both cathartic and liberating, showing how the protagonist no longer needs to hold on to the past or the people who hurt her. Please feel free to comment below if you like this. Remember to like and subscribe for more.